Well, good morning. First of all, I want to just start by saying I've got a tremendous sense of optimism this morning. We have an opportunity this session to follow through on our commitment to Oregonians to build an enduring prosperity for our state. I'm joined here today by representatives of the Oregon Business Plan, Associated Oregon Industries, the Oregon Business Association, the Oregon Business Council, and the Portland Business Alliance, all of whom have worked together diligently for well over a year to find a way to reduce the cost and improve the quality of our health care and to improve our system of public education. And all of them and their organizations have repeatedly emphasized the fact that health care and education are essential elements of long-term job creation and economic prosperity. Last year, this legislature, and some of the leaders of that legislature have joined us this morning, took on one of the largest budget deficits in the nation and erased that with civility and integrity, a remarkable feat in this divided nation, and took the first steps to transform our system of public education and our system of health care. This year, we have the opportunity to move that important work forward with the same spirit of bipartisanship. I think Oregonians expect no less. And I think at the end of the day, these issues are not Republican issues or Democratic issues. These are Oregon issues. These are issues of economic prosperity, and they are key elements of the Oregon Business Plan. As you can see from this chart, there are many important bipartisan jobs bills moving through this session. And we continue to work to find an agreement on the proposal to tap some surplus water out of the Columbia to expand agricultural operations in eastern Oregon. And in total, this is a jobs package of which the entire legislature should be proud. But without passing the two education bills and our two health care bills, we will not have fulfilled our obligation to Oregonians. So we are here today simply to reemphasize the importance of those four bills to the Oregon Business Plan and to our overall job creation effort and effort to get Oregon's economy going again, and to touch on some of the consequences of failing to do so. The health insurance exchange bill, if it fails to pass, will have two detrimental consequences. First, it will put at risk our federal waivers and some $2.5 billion that we hope to get into the state to make this transition, because the Obama administration views our work in Oregon not simply as a way to reform Medicaid, but to reform our overall delivery system that eventually will reduce costs for small businesses and families alike. Second, without the passage of this bill, we will leave Oregon's small businesses simply at the mercy of the small group market, which is increasingly becoming unaffordable, and the cost of health care is a job killer in the state of Oregon. Without passing the early childhood delivery bill, we'll continue to throw 18,000 children over the stern every year, kids who will come to school without the potential to achieve and thrive and become contributing members of our society, and that should simply not be acceptable to any of us. And without passing the achievement compacts, we will be unable to achieve our 40-40-20 goals that have been endorsed by all of these organizations that are with me today by 2025. Next year's class of kindergartners are the class of 2025, and we have school districts across Oregon waiting to engage in the process of developing and signing those achievement compacts starting this April. We will not be able to do that if we don't move this bill forward. We will fail to get our No Child Left Behind waiver, and we'll be stuck with a system that is graduating only 60% of Oregon high school students, which is not a good signal for having a competitive workforce for the 21st century. Again, I remain very optimistic that this session, like the last one, is going to produce a significant package of legislation that Oregonians will look at with pride that will help us move beyond the current recession to a much more prosperous future. With that, I'd like to turn the podium over to Pat Wrighton, who is the chairman of the Oregon Business Plan.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning. I'm Pat Wrighton, current chair of the Oregon Business Plan Steering Committee. I'm also president and CEO of Pacific Power, representing not only myself but the state's major business associations. Just a reminder, the Oregon Business Plan had two primary goals. One, to create 25,000 new jobs per year in the state, as well as to bring the average per capita income of Oregonians up to at least the national average by 2020. As part of doing that, we focused the plan on key challenges of preparing students for success in the workplace, containing skyrocketing costs of health care, which affects both the public and the private sectors. And we've made significant progress, with major bills passing last year to make improvements in both areas. Since then, the business community and labor and other key stakeholders have partnered to help build out those reforms prescribed in those bills. And we entered this legislature with widespread agreement that those reforms would continue and this session's bills to implement them needed to pass. We're glad to see that the Medicare reform legislation is being voted on today by the House. We need to get the other bills up for a vote as soon as possible so that we don't lose momentum on the tremendous work that's been done so far. We've come simply too far to let those fail. Doing so is critical for Oregonians and it's critical for Oregon business. We respect and like to highlight the fact that there are other jobs bills pending. You see some of them listed here, representing the Oregon Business Plan and the business associations, as well as being the CEO of a company that serves hard-hit rural areas of the state. We need to acknowledge our support for those efforts as well. The Oregon Investment Act, legislation on Columbia River withdrawals, legislation to extend enterprise zones, legislation to deal with the tax circumstance of new large data center siting in our state. Those are part of our jobs agenda too, and we hope and expect that they'll be worked out as well. We want to compliment co-speakers Hannah and Robland, President Courtney. Our understanding is that strong collaborative efforts are underway in that regard, and we strongly support the governor working collaboratively with those leaders to move the agenda as a whole forward in a way that's satisfactory to all parties and in a way that allows all sides to declare victory on a jobs agenda that moves Oregon forward. Thank you very much.
We'd be happy to answer any questions.
I'd like to ask about the water bill because that's not on the list. You mentioned it briefly, and it was on Mr. Wrighton's list of bills we'd like to see get through. Where's that stand?
So first, let me just say that my administration is very supportive of the end objective, which is to tap some of the high water flows during the winter in the Columbia in excess of those that are needed for in-stream purposes, to provide storage capacity for those, and then use that water to expand agricultural operations in Eastern Oregon. We've been spending a lot of time, actually a whole lot of time, working on this over the past week. This morning, we have my negotiator, Richard Whitman, reached agreement with Representative McLean on an approach. I have not seen that, and I'm sure it has to be vetted with the rest of the caucus and the Speaker. But I remain optimistic that we can address that issue.
What about the state forest logging bill, to increase logging on state forest?
Right. I do not support that bill, and I had that conversation with the Speaker very early on, and I did go down to the Agricultural Committee to express the reasons for that, and they're really quite simple. We have a 9% unemployment statewide, much higher in rural Oregon. We have 870,000 acres of state forest that's producing about 10% of our harvest. We have almost 17 million acres of federal forest that's producing 12% of the harvest. So you're not going to solve this problem by increasing logging on 800,000 acres of state land. And most of the communities that are suffering from the economic downturn are timber communities that are in landscapes dominated by federal forests. So the solution is to essentially lean into particularly the O&C issue and change the management paradigm so that we can begin to increase harvest off of our federal lands. I've requested in this budget resources to hire a full-time forest policy person so that we can really engage in the process that's been started by our congressional delegation. And to me, that's the long-term answer for rural Oregon.
Governor, the federal government, though, obviously works much slower than the state government. Is there room for some type of even temporary compromise to allow more logging on state forests until you are able to achieve what you'd like with the
Well, you know, we have increased harvest on state forest under the current forest management plan. We've increased harvest under a very controversial approach on the Elliott, I know firsthand. So I would say those steps have already been taken. We also have something called the greatest permanent value rule that seeks to balance the uses on our state forest. That has been endorsed by our current Board of Forestry that included timber representatives such as Jennifer Philippi. So I'm not inclined to try to seek a short-term fix on our state forest, but I am very optimistic that we can, by the end of this year, put together a coalition and a consensus package that we can take back to Congress and hopefully begin to go where the gold is, and that's to improve the health of our forests, at the same time taking off fiber for mills and for woody biomass.
Governor, you say you're optimistic that prior to these bills were passed. Will this end up, however, in a series of, dare I say, trades between bills desired by one side and bills that you desire?
Actually, I think if you look at the package in total, this is a very impressive package, and I think the negotiations we've been having on the Columbia River bill have been about the Columbia River bill and how we can create the right balance to move that forward politically and from a policy standpoint. So I think this is a normal conversation that we have every legislative session. I think this is my 13th, and there's always a point where things get a little tense, but we've got great leadership in the legislature, people who have demonstrated that they have the capacity to work things out and put partisanship behind and put the needs of Oregonians first. I'm very confident that will happen again.
Is the fact that Co-Speaker Hanna and Republican leaders are here in the room indicate anything that you all are still talking about?
Well, I didn't know they were coming, so but I'm delighted to have them here.
Governor, there's a plan to be done with the session on Wednesday, which doesn't seem to give a lot of time to get all this stuff done. I assume that you would rather, if it came to it, spend more time to get this accomplished than the importance of leaving at the end of the month.
I'm confident the legislature will do the right thing and will get its business done in a timely fashion. And I would say that the 29th is not out of the question. Most of these bills, including the major policy bills, have been worked. They've come out of policy committees with huge majorities, in the case of the insurance exchange and the early childhood bill, unanimously. So this is really a process issue to get, I think, final agreement on a couple of other bills, and then I think this can move rather rapidly. I believe the Ways and Means subcommittees are planning to move their bills to full on Friday. So, I mean, I think we're well set up to get out next week.
And just a quick follow-up, I mean, do you think that this session just didn't allow the time to really fully vet these bills?
Well, I think you raise an interesting question, which really has to do with how do we work out the growing pains of annual sessions. I don't think anyone really thought through the short nature of the interim, and I would imagine that some reflection will be given in the future as to how you can do that. But I know that these bills actually have been vetted pretty thoroughly. I mean, I know that Representative Freeman has spent endless hours talking with people on the health care bill, and as you know, at the end of the day, we've got, for our education bills, we've got support of the AFT, the Oregon Education Association, the Confederation of Oregon School Boards, the Oregon School Administrators Association, as well as these business organizations.
You have an agreement on the budget that you can live with. I understand the legislature is about to unveil its...
Yes, I do, actually, and they've requested that we take a little more time and come back in May with a more thoughtful, excuse me, effort to address the concerns that were raised by the co-chairs about middle management, and we will certainly comply with that.
How would that work when you say come back in May? Something to the E-board, or are you talking like
it's basically a plan coming to the E-board, and we attempted to do that. We had a very short time frame, and obviously could have done a better job, and so it's our intention to try to comply with the request of the co-chairs of Ways and Means and bring a more comprehensive approach in May.
When you were talking about the exchange, you referenced the $2.5 billion the federal government may start giving Oregon to invest in those bills, in those projects. Does Oregon need both transformation and the exchange to get that money from the federal government?
We definitely need transformation, and there's a question as to whether or not we need the exchange. And in my conversations with the administration, I'm not saying that we are absolutely not going to get the resources if we don't get the exchange, but clearly their interest in Oregon is that we've got a strategy that changes the delivery model, starting with the 600,000 people on the health plan, but then hopefully creates an option on the exchange that could involve public employees, that could be an option for small businesses. More importantly, sort of as a separate issue of the $2.5 billion. We have small businesses in this state that are dying in the small group market. It is hemorrhaging. They cannot afford health care. They have to let people go. It's an issue of retaining qualified workers. It's a huge business issue. So aside from the waivers in the transformation bill, that insurance exchange, that marketplace, insurance marketplace for all small businesses is absolutely essential. And we are, after all, a small business state.
Thank you all.
Thank you.